Divine Source, Great Spirit, for the highest good of all, we come this day to receive your wisdom and your grace, to be shown the way out of separation, to be returned in heart and mind to the fullness, the limitlessness, the light that we are in truth. And so it is. Welcome to Talking Spirit. My name is Jutta, and I'm back with my lovely friend Elisabeth. So this morning I was in prayer around our recording today, and I was recalling an interaction I had yesterday, and the words ego backlash and hypothetical thinking just popped into my head. As I was checking in with the spirit, there was a story coming together in my mind around this. When we get on this path and we really start to link up with the spirit and develop this relationship with the spirit, and we start to feel movement and feel like we're ready to make decisions with the spirit, we land in this space of just wanting to be truly helpful and wanting to do what is meant for us versus trying to go for things we think we want and need. As we make these kind of decisions and start to really flow with the vibe of the spirit, it's like there's something really beautiful that starts to develop inside. And it's like there's something really joyful that's starting to grow inside. And as we start to make these decisions with the spirit, oftentimes, especially at the beginning, it seems like what happens is that the part of our mind that's afraid and feels itself to be limited and small, it comes in and just wants to destroy all of the joy that we felt as we were in the decision making with the spirit. And it just comes in with all of these things it thinks it knows that will occur if you go along with the spirit's plan. It oftentimes has to do with some form of not being safe. You won't have what you need. You're going to lose all your friends. People think you're going crazy. You're not going to have the relationships that are supportive to your mind. You won't have any money. There's all of this stuff that gets thrown at you by the small mind that really has no idea what's going on. It's very tempting to listen to all of those things and fall into the fear and falter and just doubt everything that you felt was actually meant for you by the spirit. You often reference joy, the joy of the spirit and the joy that one might feel bubbling up as the alignment starts to take hold. I really had no real connection to joy as an experience for a long time on my path. So that actually wasn't really a guiding force that I was really aware of. But I did have the awareness of a lack of peace of mind. So that was really more my barometer that was being used by the spirit to show me where I was getting off track with things. And for me, I have to say that almost all the steps that I've taken, while clearly in my mind on my path, they've all flushed up darkness. They've all flushed up thoughts and emotions that needed to be flushed up. So it's good to remember that that's just part of the path, is we're constantly being expanded. So we're constantly purifying. The degree to which the purification intensity happens, or, it just doesn't seem to have as much grip as stuff comes up now for me, but that doesn't mean I'm not purifying every day, because I am. But I always had to face those kinds of dark thoughts, doubt thoughts, hypotheticals, and I don't know that there's any kind of fix for it won't happen. I think it's kind of back to the individual constitution, mental makeup, etc. But my experience has been that the more we get into that alignment, the more that we're clear, really, really clear, what am I doing this for? The easier those times become. The mind really doesn't want to wake up. It really doesn't want to accept this limitless power and potency that we are sourced from. It is going to do everything in its power to say, hey, don't go here. Don't do this. Bad choice. You're going to fail. You're going to be destitute. You're going to be alone. That just seems to be kind of its program that it runs. When I have those thoughts, I've come to see
almost everybody has those same kinds of thoughts. They're not personal to me as a person. They're not of my mind as some separate unit. They are the darkness and the programming in the mind that we all are called to transcend.
We've talked about this before. We're always trying to make more space for light. And so what has to go is all the darkness. It's nice to remember that whatever is coming up is not personal, even though it feels like, the ego mind just loves throwing it right into our faces. And it's so convincing in its stories that, everything you're doing will fail. Everything you're doing with the spirit will fail. It's very convincing in the moment. It comes with a visceral experience most of the time. And, I do like what you said too, that your impetus for going with the spirit wasn't so much the joy, but noticing that you're not peaceful. When we talk about ego backlash, everybody experiences it at one point or another. And I think a lot of people actually just live in ego backlash most of the time. And it's very scary and it's very dark and it's very uncomfortable. We have to have these contrasting experiences of surrendering into deep prayer and ask for help and ask to be shown what's right for us in terms of how the spirit sees the whole picture, because our small mind can't see anything, but it loves to pretend that it can, and it knows that everything is going to just be crap. The funny thing about it is things will be crap if we don't go with the spirit. We know that in some part of our mind, that the old stories that we're listening to in our minds just are that, these old stories coming up for release and for giving over to the light. For me now, when the ego wants to throw these kinds of things at me, it's actually a little boring. It's most of the time just really boring. I can go with the ego and I know what I'm going to get. The other option is working with the spirit and doing things in unconventional ways and making decisions in unconventional ways that most people won't understand. And there's a possibility that things will turn out much better than I could have ever anticipated. And that option simply isn't there when I'm trying to make decisions from the ego mind. There's just no option for peace and joy. The ego tries to keep us safe with these stories, but it's not really safety. It's not expansive, and it's not going to really bring us any joy. To me, there's only one option, and that is to face the fear of going into the unknown with the spirit when the ego wants to come in. And it's something to watch, but it's not something to focus on necessarily for me. It's something I can almost have a conversation with and just, as much as I can stay in the space of like, well, you know what? I'm going to go into this adventure with a sense of experimentation and just try things out with the spirit, because the way I've been doing them up until now with you, ego, has just not been working out. It's not working out. So I'm going to try something new and see where that takes me. If I end up losing things, sometimes that's just the way it needs to go. It's all part of this greater plan. It's all part of a deep healing that has to occur for the mind. I don't know all the healing that I need to go through, so I'm going to take the hands off the wheel and really allow myself to be guided.
I was hearing another word that you like to use, which is mesmerism. We've been hypnotized to believe so many things that are just not true about ourselves. Coming out of that kind of hypnotism is a deep journey. There are times where, of course, we receive grace in such a way that it all drops, right? There are people that have complete and total awakenings seemingly in a moment, right? There's maybe eons of journey that led to that seeming moment, but for most of us, it's a process. And so I guess, there's just this message of like, be gentle, because it's eons of programming that you're coming up against in answering the call. Doesn't mean we are going to park it there and get comfy in our awareness that it's a challenge, but just to like in those moments where it seems like you're really up against it, it's good to remember, we're breaking patterns and ways of being that have been invested in for a long time. And they're very deep, thick programs. It's just hearing vulnerability versus invulnerability. Being vulnerable in this world seems to be a way of being that people would not choose, right? A person in the world generally is not going to go for vulnerability. Most of our forms and structures, most of our thoughts and ideas and opinions and fantasies are about doing everything to be invulnerable. Have your insurance, eat the so-called right food, know the right people, right? There are all these ideas about what will make you, in the world's terms, invulnerable or as invulnerable as you can be. For me, the spiritual journey is all about having that idea destroyed. In the end, we come to be shown that actually we become invulnerable through our vulnerability. We become invulnerable by being divested of the thinking of the world and getting back into that channel with the spirit, which is our safe haven. And so, your idea of these invitations into experimentation, the invitation into taking leaps of faith, we're asked to choose vulnerability. I've had for months now the movie Being There showing up. I got to see that movie in the movie theater with my mom, who loved Peter Sellers. She loved him in part because he was able to demonstrate on the screen the buffoon, the Pink Panther, the whole experience of those movies. And in Being There, he was able to play the fool in a really dynamic way. And I think that really spoke to my mom's own innocence that she really was searching for. I think she saw it reflected in him. And this movie Being There, the guy's kind of an Elmer Fudd sort of character who is very blank in his mind. He's very vulnerable in the world's terms. He has been a gardener. He's been caring for this property for quite some time. And his person died, and next thing you know, maybe he's going to be homeless. And it's a funny story because all these people come along his path and start imagining him to be this very wise, worldly person because they're basically using this blank screen that he is to project their own stuff onto. But we see through the movie that he is just guided by this force and that everything that he needs just shows up. And that in him not having the judging component active in his mind, he just allows everything to be as it is. That's a beautiful state of mind. And that's in large part what we're talking about, getting to this point where the judgments, the computations, the projections, the woulda, coulda, shoulda, the what ifs, all of that drops. We don't go there with a bag of tricks for how to manage our day-to-day, moment-by-moment experience in our pocket. They're two different thought systems.
Yeah, Being There is just such a beautiful demonstration of no opinion about what's meant to be happening. And you can just see him being carried. He's such a beautiful gift to everybody around him. The other movie that was coming to my mind is The Man Who Knew Too Little. If you want to have a good laugh, just go find that movie and watch it because it's so great. It's not only funny, it can be seen as a teaching tool from the spirit for what it can feel like to go through life without any idea that things could go wrong. I think for most that experience this kind of idea of ego backlash, there's so much in the mind that's saying you can get it wrong, you can make the wrong decisions, you can choose wrongly, you can screw up your whole life. Every decision you seem to have to make seems like the most life or death scenario that you can imagine. And if that's something that's really strongly operating in your mind, go watch The Man Who Knew Too Little, because if you see that movie from a place of being a story led by the spirit, then there's a way to allow these kind of movies in. Like we can start to apply things we see in these movies to situations in our lives. And that movie's just fantastic. I love it so much. Yeah, I think just that idea of like, I can get this wrong. It's such a painful thing to carry around. It's going to be a huge impediment to allowing ourselves to really get on this with the spirit and be in this place where we can feel like we're just experimenting and it's not like we're making really important decisions, even if it's around things like moving to a new country or switching careers or leaving relationships or, getting into new relationships. It seems like these are such big decisions that affect everything in our lives. what I've seen for myself, it really seems like I can't make any wrong decisions. I am just trying things out. I'm experimenting and seeing how things feel. I've made huge decisions. I'm so glad I made all of them. It's not been full of joy in some of those, instances, but it's all led to so much healing and so many connections and just so much stuff that I couldn't have expected that ended up being so awesome. The healing just occurs alongside of that, and that's what it's really for. I like that you bring in that, these ideas of vulnerability and invulnerability, and the only invulnerability we can feel is not in lining up with these scary stories that the ego or our small mind wants to throw at us. That's not how we're going to find invulnerability, by trying to protect ourselves and trying to be safe. And the invulnerability that we really crave doesn't rely on anything in this world. It doesn't rely on any specifics. So where can we find that? The only thing that's non-specific is the spirit, because the spirit can see all the ripples of healing that want to occur and how they can occur best for all involved. That's what we want to line up. That is where that invulnerability is. The ego just cannot provide it. It can't do it.
I think that this idea of joy is really important. And I think for me, why that wasn't really so much the guiding element that was calling me. I mean, it was in my heart calling me there, but it wasn't as obvious to me because the mental body, you might say, the mind stuff was so much louder. And, there were a lot of symbols of the heart that had been coming through for quite some time. And we talked in one talk about, the heart is a real spiritual technology. It is our gateway, you might say, into that joy. And so a lot of these kind of ego backlash conversations, a lot of those things are often coming very aggressively when we're more in our head than in our heart. The more we get into the heart, which is really where the mental and the intuition can become married, when they start to function together, then we can be a little less in the ego backlash and more in the flow. Then we can be more in the this is joyful rather than I'm just going for some peace of mind here. That tipping point that you're referencing in some way does start to come online. And we do become less enamored. We do become less mesmerized by the ego story because we're fed more by the heart. It's a very different way of being. And it does require more and more depth in the vulnerability camp. The intuition, we're linked up and synced up with the spirit, but the intuition is much more having to go and step by step go on faith. Go on, there's some deep knowing I have in my heart that is the thing that's pulling me into this next step, rather than the construct of the mind trying to figure it all out and have a storyline about linear time and how to arrange everything, right? They're just different ways. Doesn't have to be a good or a bad, but it certainly is what I'm called to live more in. I'm not looking to kill my mind. I'm not looking to kill the mental processing. I'm just looking to have my heart and my intuition, which is my link up with the spirit, be more the steering wheel for my vehicle.
I love that you call the heart a spiritual technology. I think that's so cool because it really is that way. I've just become so endlessly interested in feeling a spark in my heart. I just feel like the spirit wants me joyful and sparkly so that I can do the work that I need to be doing for this awakening. Yeah, there is this tipping point. I'm not sure we can make that happen. I don't think we can make the tipping point happen. It's more, at some point we will just really become fed up with the stories we've heard so many times. When it gets boring, that's sort of when the wave crashes over into the spirit. Anytime the ego's voice comes back in, it's just not as tempting anymore. And, kind of throughout the whole talk, I just had the elevator scene from the movie Revolver playing in my head, where he steps into the elevator, which is the scariest place for him because he feels like he's going to die, or the thing will just plummet to the ground and he's going to get smashed, or he's going to suffocate in there because the space is too small. It's just too tight. There's all of these ideas around being in the elevator. And he's actually able to, with space, listen to the ego's story and voice and set himself apart from it to where he can really experience that's actually not me. Just with this little sentence, right? I can hear you. I can hear you. Okay. It brings the space in between you and the stories. And it actually allows you to observe and decide again, choosing again for the spirit versus the fear, choosing the love versus the fear. Yeah, I think it's, just about examining and just paying attention to what's in your mind and just really asking the question, is what I'm hearing possibly the spirit? Because if it's any fearful story, you can be certain that it isn't. We have to learn to not give it so much attention. Keep going for that connection with the spirit and for the spark. It's your right and it's your inheritance, and it's really inevitable that that'll be the experience. I'm really grateful for this topic, and I'm glad we talked about it. So thank you, Elisabeth, and thanks to anyone who's joined us.